France and Germany have announced funding commitments to South Africa's energy transition. I suppose many are questioning why South Africa is being pressured to do so while these very nations are turning to fossil fuels because of the global energy crisis. Let's unpack this further with Dr. Roland Ngam, Program Manager for Climate Justice and Socio-Ecological Transformation at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, Southern Africa. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. I suppose the big question is why? Why is South Africa being pressured into the big switch? And where does Germany and France stand with their energy mix?
Well, good afternoon to you and to all the viewers. I think it's a bit misleading to say that South Africa is being pressured into doing this. The reason for approaching South Africa, so to speak, to participate in this deal was because obviously South Africa is the biggest emitter of sulfur dioxide in the world. Its coal fleet really is a major emitter of sulfur dioxide, methane gases, and so on, about 25% of all emissions on the African continent. And so at COP26, the EU, Germany, France, and the United States offer this package as obviously a solution that was really going to be tested in South Africa and eventually used elsewhere in the world, in Asia, for example, if South Africa's just energy transition takes off properly, then it will become a global model. And so we should see this really as an opportunity rather than being pressured into going green.
So with the arrangement seen as a prototype, so to speak, what will it mean with the current problems that South Africa is facing, the Eskom crisis and the rolling blackouts? What will the success of this prototype mean?
Yes, so just to take it to your last question as well, why is the EU pressuring South Africa when it also has issues with its own fossil fuels? The EU obviously importing over 100 billion euros worth of gas every year in order to have really energy sufficiency. South Africa also at the same time really uses a mix of gas, coal, nuclear, and so on. And so in the short term, we have found that its aging coal fleet really has been collapsing, and alarmingly this year already over 81 days of load shedding. And so this has to be renewed quickly. And when those commitments were made at COP26, it was also partly because President Ramaphosa and the Presidential Climate Change Commission realized that part of the energy fleet has to be retired anyway and replaced with more efficient energy sources. And just quickly before I conclude, remember that Komati, which was commissioned, I think, in 1957, had been retired, brought back to the fleet, retired again, and I think now we are talking about Komati and other stations that are really more than half a century old.
You mentioned COP26. In just under 2 months, COP27 will be underway. What do you imagine to be some of the very important focal points, especially given South Africa's position? Yes,
and this really is colored by the news of the moment, right? The Russian invasion of Ukraine. Because COP26 really everybody was determined that it was time to power past coal. Everybody was talking about keeping fossils in the ground. But now moving to COP27, where there is a major energy crisis in Europe, drought has caused half of France's nuclear fleet to collapse, with maintenance issues also involved there. And the gas pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and 2, are not available anymore. LNG imports from Russia not available. And so Europe is in the midst of an energy crunch and trying to import energy from everywhere it can find it. And African ministers have also been trying to use this as an opportunity to sell gas to Europe. But also at the same time, in the case of South Africa, which produces a lot of energy, which is really energy hungry, it wants to exploit its gas and coal resources for its developmental needs. And so COP27, I don't think will be very positive for those who expect a scaling back of coal and gas use.
And of course, perhaps going back to that energy mix that we were talking about between France and Germany and some of the reasons why they are putting forward these talks and this loan to South Africa. And, does that now boil down to both countries moving entirely away from fossil fuels and incorporating even more renewable energy as they put their foot forward to assist South Africa?
Well, not quite, because Germany really uses a lot of gas, and it is going to continue using a lot of gas. Remember that the European Union has adopted a motion saying that gas and nuclear are green energy sources. And so in the short term, that threshold at the level of Europe has been really dealt with. And so what Germany is trying to do now really is to secure other sources of gas. The US, for example, and a coalition of countries promising about 50 billion cubic feet of gas that is replacing about 35% of what Russia used to sell to them. France as well, also using a lot of nuclear. France has about 56 nuclear plants. So in France's estimation, it is already green because nuclear energy is renewable energy. The problems that we have with it really are based on uranium and related matters. Now, both France and Germany, and to a certain extent England, are also fast-tracking installation of renewables. Why? Because previously there were these debates about what happens when the sun doesn't shine and so on. And in countries, unfortunately, especially in England, they didn't move fast enough in setting up renewables. But now, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, everybody sees that it is important to have a bigger fleet of wind and solar and so on, even if the reliability is not always there. For example, when the sun doesn't shine and so on.
And very lastly, before we wrap up, Dr. Ngam, looking at the composition of this arrangement, how much do we know about whether or not South Africa has put out a plan on how the funds will be used and how the breakdown will work in terms of prioritizing the funds?
Well, the Presidential Climate Change Commission has said clearly that it intends to obviously use Komati as a pilot project, about 2,000 gigawatts of solar and wind to be installed. At the same time, it is a just energy transition, which means leaving no one behind. And so a lot of the money is also going into social projects. That is training and reskilling some of the workers from Komati. Also training all the people in the related small businesses, all the people who used to own the small spaza shops, the women who used to sell food to the workers, etc. So it is not just replacing the energy fleet, it is also everything around it. And so the Presidential Climate Change Commission has set out a plan, and done a tour of South Africa to start presenting this plan to the country.
Very well. Thank you so much for that input, unpacking that dynamic. Dr. Roland Ngam, Program Manager for Climate Justice and Socio-Ecological Transformation at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, Southern Africa. Thank you for your time.